Hello and welcome to Season 3 of Everybody Hates Your Brand, a podcast for all things marketing. In this season opener, we talk to Zoe Edwards, Principal Recruitment Consultant for the Industry Club, about all things recruitment in the world of marketing and advertising. Without any further ado, on with the interview. So yes, as I said in the intro, we're very lucky to be joined today by Zoe Edwards, who's Principal Recruitment Consultant for the Industry Club. At the beginning of every podcast interview, we like our guests to do a quick history into who they are and where they come from and their career to date, so people can understand your perspective. So Zoe, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
No problem at all. Happy to have you here. So yeah, if you could just give us a quick rundown on your background, please.
Yes, of course. So I currently am a recruiter and a headhunter for the Industry Club, and I specialise in planning and strategy in creative agencies and at direct brands. And then I also look after senior account management and agency management. It's quite a broad remit. I've done that for about 6 years. And prior to that, I spent about 15 plus years, I like to say, working in creative agencies. So I was a business director at agencies like VCCP, Publicis, Omnicom agencies. So hopefully I kind of have quite a good view of inside what my candidates go through, as well as now having a good understanding of what agencies are hiring for and what candidates are going through at the moment.
Cool. Thank you very much for that. And it's one of the reasons I'm so chuffed you're on is that it's such a, well, the last couple of years has been such a peculiar moment in time, and so many things have changed over the last couple of years, that it'd be really interesting to get the perspective of a recruiter, certainly from a sort of agency marketing perspective. I've always kind of thought that recruitment kind of comes in waves. It's like a study in power dynamics, and sometimes the power lies with the people recruiting, and sometimes it lies with the job hunters. And I would say that the perception right now is that mostly the power sits with the job hunters. Do you think that is correct? And do you think that's going to change? Because we're all looking on the horizon for a recession, I get the feeling.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I would say for the last 6 to 12 months, for 80% of creative agencies and direct brands, probably the power is with the candidate at the moment. And that is because there is a shortage of people actively looking to change jobs at the moment, and there are many roles out there. So lots of agencies looking to hire people, not so many people looking. And I think that's probably because of a couple of different reasons. I think one, a lot of people sat tight over COVID and didn't move. So it's just a bit of pent up demand for people moving. But there's also other reasons which we can kind of go into in a little bit more detail. Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting, this idea of candidates having the power. I mean, I think there is certainly a point at the moment where agencies are willing to pay very high salaries to bring people in. And agencies, some of them perhaps are a little panicked that they can't get the right talent in. And that's a bit more of the power with the candidate because there's fewer of them looking and fewer good people in market looking. But I think fundamentally, when you're job searching as a candidate, you should still be following the right etiquette and looking for the right job, the right role, the right career ambition, not just being all about salary. Because I think that if you're purely salary driven in this market, those sort of things might come back and bite you in 6 months' time. And you allude to kind of recession.
Yes.
I think there are certainly examples I know where some candidates have potentially doubled their salaries through a move in the last 6 months, which would make me quite nervous if there are suddenly budget cuts in an agency
like
to be made.
Almost put a target on their backs.
Well, I think if you increase your salary above your market worth, because the current climate, people are paying more than that. If they need to make cuts and you're the most expensive account manager or planner because they've paid over the odds, that's a watch out. I think also if you get paid much more than you're probably worth, you'll probably stay on the same salary for a few years because no one's going to pay you more.
No, absolutely. I also think that power dynamic, one of the things that's happening at the moment, and you read a lot about, and you yourself were featured in a campaign article about this recently, is the idea of like the Great Resignation. It sounds so portentous and important. But is that like a thing? Or is that something that has been overdone? Are you seeing people, decide, I don't want to do this anymore? Are they going in the industry? Or are they going elsewhere? Are they like, has that whole thing actually played out? Or is that, I don't know, a press sort of constructed thing?
I mean, whilst it feels like a bit of a cliched headline at the moment, it very much is a thing. I don't think it's just unique to advertising agencies and marketing departments. I mean, interestingly enough, I've got a child at junior school, and quarter of the teachers there are leaving this year because they're going on to other opportunities, or they're moving house, or they're changing their situation. So I don't think it's unique to advertising, but I think it is very much a thing. I did some research at the beginning of the year because I was realizing there was a pattern when I was talking to candidates of that people weren't interested in agency jobs, or many of them weren't interested in agency jobs. And a lot of people that I approached were telling me that they wanted to do something different. So I did a survey through LinkedIn to find out what that might be. And I think probably what I learned is only about 35% of candidates actually wanted to stay in creative agencies.
35, so
Um,
what, just over 1 in 3?
yeah. This is of a sort of 400 or 500 people surveyed, but the reasons they gave for either they recently moved or they were looking to move is they wanted more variety. They wanted to try and experience something different. So, I mean, about a quarter of them are looking at doing career pivots. And by that, I mean totally moving away from marketing and advertising. Popular kind of areas that, and I'm biased towards strategy and planning, possibly, but popular areas are things like looking like they've got a higher calling. They either want to go into something that's more about sustainability, more about not for profit, less commercial strategy. Some are looking to go into things like teaching,
Okay.
career coaching.
Replace those
Uh,
junior school teachers you were just talking about.
exactly. So I think there's definitely a kind of I think over COVID, people have realized and reflected and realized there are other things they can be doing. And maybe also because those other careers have an equal amount of churn, there's more opportunity to change direction than there has been in the past. I think some of the other things as well is a lot of people have gone client side. So a lot of people, whether or not it's going to a direct brand and they have an in-house agency, or where I think TikTok and Meta and Instagram and all of those businesses have taken the opportunity to take some of the talent that's in agencies, and that offers them a different way of doing things.
Yeah, yeah. So they maintain that kind of creative, strategic edge, but because the difference between that kind of client side and going to work for Boots, or you know what I mean, or something like that as a marketing director or something along those lines, isn't there?
Exactly. I mean, I think it's
No
there are
disrespect
still
to
people
Boots,
obviously.
fabulous brand, obviously.
And I think there's, I mean, interestingly, if you go to a direct brand, there's two ways of doing things. There's in-house agencies, which is essentially doing exactly what you did in an agency, but for a one
Yeah.
brand or a parent company with lots of brands. Going into a marketing role is a little bit different
Mm.
because it's a very different kind of role. But equally, that I think is easier now than it has been in the past. But all of that means that when candidates leave agencies, we're just not finding people automatically to fill those roles because
Mm.
there aren't as many people around. And I think agencies are talking about having anything between a 20%, some agencies a 50% churn rate in the last
Wow.
year. Yeah, not everybody, but a few.
Mm.
And that causes a real problem. So yes, the Great Resignation definitely exists.
Okay. And so I guess when you're thinking about what you've described there, a lot of the reasons people are leaving are kind of pull things. They're things that are pulling people away from an agency. I've got a higher calling, or I just want to completely change, or whatever it might be. And I guess the other aspect is of any job departure in my book is also there's a push element. It's like I'm like something's pushing me out. So when agencies are thinking about retaining staff, what's working and what isn't? Do you think, I don't know, maybe agencies, it's been a blind spot for agencies in the past? Is it because there's always somebody new to come in? So how are agencies reacting to all this essentially?
So I think it's a good question. I think over the COVID period, people were grateful to have jobs and they were working really hard, and agencies were jumping really high for their clients and over delivering.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was sustainable for a long period of time. So I think there was a lot of burnout. So I think a lot of candidates I've spoken to just exhausted from work. Ways I've seen agencies try and overcome that, and some I think are quite successful, some I think are a little bit short termist, is offer sabbaticals, which I find quite funny. We work you really hard, go and have 6 weeks off, and then come back and work really hard again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I think it's good that they're doing that, and I think people are grateful for it. Other things I've seen are potentially offering people slightly different roles, giving them more diversity and broader opportunities within the roles they're in, which seems to be working quite well. I think other than that, agencies just don't. I don't see what else they feel they can do. I mean, actually, there's one other thing which I think has been quite interesting. Is I've definitely seen more candidates who are agencies are really investing in training, and when I say training, I mean more than the agency doing a lunch and learn. Um, I mean sponsoring them to do a master's in behavioural science, for example, or sending more juniors on IPA or APG courses. So really putting, I mean, some of these masters, that's sort of 8 to 12 grand for 2 years. That's a serious investment.
Yes.
And also I think will mean that that person will not leave. So it really helps with retention. And I think they're far and few between, but I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think the training and personally, somebody who went through the Institute of Direct Marketing a good long time ago and the Chartered Institute of Marketing, I think more marketing training is a good thing. I'm with Mark Ritson when it comes to that kind of angle.
Yeah.
So that's a really positive thing to hear. I guess there are two things pinging around my head in terms of retention, and I'm interested to get your perspective on these. One of which is the whole hybrid working from home thing. So I was reading an article, I think it was in Campaign back end of last week, maybe early this week. And it kind of posited that there was a split between what senior leadership want, which is people in the office and buzzing and it all being, like the good old days, quote unquote, if those good old days ever actually existed, or if it's just in the fantasy of somebody's brain.
Oh, they did. They definitely did.
And B, that the kind of more people, rank and file, but the rest of the agency kind of actually I'm quite happy doing 2 days in the office and 3 days at home or whatever it is. I'm listening to Adam and Eve do the whole one. It's 4 and Flex, I think it's called, with their 4 days in and 1 day when they can. What are you seeing in relation to that? Is that a thing that's causing people to leave agencies or to stay because they like the hybrid work?
So I think that there have definitely been some agencies recently that have decided to steer towards presenteeism. Adam and Eve, you mentioned 4 days a week. There are other agencies I know that are probably going to start implementing that soon. There are some people who will resign because of that and will change agencies. And I'm already having conversations with some of those people because they moved out to Brighton in lockdown. They moved to Norfolk. They moved to wherever they did. And it's not sustainable. And I think I can understand why. I'm a little bit sympathetic to leadership because when I worked in agencies for the first 15 years of my career, especially as an account handler, it was fun being in the office and it was fun working with everyone. I know I learned most of the things I knew from the people around me. So I am sympathetic towards there is a need for being in the office, but possibly not 4 or 5 days a week. I think younger people I work with, we all think about working from home and all the benefits that it offers. But younger people, if you're in a flat share and there's 5 of you and you're arguing over who's got the Wi-Fi and meetings at the kitchen table, or if you're a young junior and you're still living with your mum and dad and your brother, I think the working from home thing's been really challenging. And therefore, I think there's a lot of people who are really welcoming that idea of going into the office. But what I also hear from them is they go and there's no one there. And that's not particularly beneficial either. So I can see pros and cons of both.
Yeah.
I think where agencies are netting out, which I think is the best, is this idea of at least 2 consistent days in the office where everybody is in to collaborate, to create together. You're not allowed just to go in there and just sit on your own that day. You've got to go in because there's meetings and things going on. And I think that's a real positive thing. I still think we need to treat people like grown-ups. They need to be able to work where's right for them.
Absolutely.
An introvert might work in a very different way to an extrovert.
Yeah. I've always thought the world up until 2 years ago was built for extroverts. They had the advantage.
Advertising, I think I agree.
They had the advantage. And then all of a sudden it's opened up to a whole bunch of different people, neurodivergency, disabled people, different. I was reading an article thing again, Campaign, the number of female creatives has gone up quite dramatically, which is amazing. They posited it was directly related to COVID and working from home and all that sort of stuff. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but there's something about, I think it opened up opportunities to get different voices in an agency, whereas before it felt of a kind in a sense.
I completely agree. I mean, it's interesting. My brother is in a wheelchair. He has been for
Mm,
quite a long time, and he's always worked for startup businesses. He's a developer, but the barriers he faced
yeah.
when we were in a world where you had to be there. I mean, he's turned up for job interviews, and there was a flight of stairs
Oh,
he couldn't possibly get up, and no lift. For him, remote working has been a real equalizer,
mm,
and means he doesn't have a lot of these issues. So it's a really hard balance to get
yeah.
to. My personal view is that those agencies and companies that have blended working, and allow people to work in a way that is best for them, but also maximizes creativity together, is the
Mm,
best solution. And I think, particularly in planning and strategy, maybe planning and strategy have always had more of a chance to work from home, maybe
mm.
than account management or other areas, because people recognize you need to go away and write a deck.
Yes.
You need to do something that requires quiet time and thinking time.
Yes, and as a planner, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I think I'm very lucky where I work. It's 2 days a week. We're all in on Tuesday, and then you can pick another day. And but no, it's certainly an interesting dynamic. I hear a lot of people saying a lot of things on both sides of the debate. What I don't see is many decent sort of statistics or studies or anything that backs up those statements a lot of the time. I think sometimes it's like the good old days where we all got together and went out for a drink and all that sort of stuff. But then there's a lot of other people who are like, actually, I didn't like that. I quite like how it is now. You're right. It's a very difficult balance to strike.
I think it is. I think the only thing I don't see many agencies
Mm,
100% committing to what the future looks like. It's a
yeah.
question I get asked all the time. Is this going to be viable long term? And I don't think anyone knows that.
No,
I think everyone's still finding their way.
I think that's absolutely fair. I think the other element then, from a financial perspective, and you were talking about money earlier, the one thing that has obviously kicked in the last, I guess, year, 6 months to a year is cost of living, and how much that has started to eat away at people's financial situation. And is that something that you're seeing agencies react to in some way? Is there an impact? Because obviously agencies we know don't run off the biggest of margins. So is it? How are they? How have you seen people respond to that so far?
I I would say that a lot of the candidates I work with are telling me the salaries that they can afford to change agencies on because of the cost of living crisis. I don't see right now salaries massively increasing because of that with the roles and the briefs I have on. I do think probably over the last 6 to 12 months salaries have increased quite a bit, but I think that was also because a year ago a lot of people are on salary cuts, and therefore they're now just getting back to what they were on
Right.
a while
Yeah.
ago. But I'm not, generally speaking, I'm not seeing a 10% increase in
No.
salaries on jobs. And I don't know if that will happen now. I think if there's been a bit of inflation in the past because of it,
Mm,
I worry that if anything, I think some of the roles I'm seeing are starting to reduce,
mm,
and some of the salaries are starting to plateau a little bit because I think everyone's looking ahead to
yeah.
marketing budgets getting cut.
Yeah.
So yes, they should be.
Mm,
Are they? I mean,
no.
I guess I tend to only see the kind of the acquisition side,
Yes.
the hiring side. I'm not sitting in all the conversations people are having with their line managers
No.
about wanting pay rises
Yeah.
and are they coming off.
Okay, well, let's move on slightly to something a little bit different. But you mentioned earlier about people going client side. I have been very, very lucky in my career to have worked client side marketing, not in like an agency, but like a client side proper marketing. Do you know what I mean? Classical
Yeah.
marketing, I suppose, is a better way of putting that. And have been lucky enough to be able to transfer that agency side and work agency side as a planner. How hard do you think it is for a client side marketer to go agency side? And how do agencies see client side marketers? Like, is it valued that you've worked client side, or are client side marketers seen as sort of maybe lacking in some key areas or key skills?
It's interesting. I was having this conversation with head of planning in an agency last week, actually,
Right.
and I was talking to her about a specific skill set she was looking for, and having being very few people in market who have that skill set. We talked a little bit about, well, would she consider someone who's come never from an agency, purely from a client side background, and her experience, which I think is interesting, is that she has met candidates like that before and she's brought them on freelance. But what she's found is that often they've been able to talk about what one should do in an agency and the role of a planner, but they've never done it. And therefore, when it came to actually doing the job, whilst they could articulate everything about the process,
Yeah.
and they could actually comment and feedback as though they were the client in the room witnessing the process, they couldn't physically do the job themselves. And that's just one point of
Yeah.
view, but it is an interesting one because I suppose, like the same way when I talk to agency people and they want to go client side, I'm often explaining to them there is a whole part of the role that they don't see. Stakeholder management,
Oh, yes.
commercials, working with product, all of those things.
Yeah.
So I think it's not that it's impossible, but
Mm.
I think there needs to be what I like to call a bit of a value
Mm.
exchange between client side and agency people in terms of what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you have a specialism in terms of media,
Mm-hmm.
so for example, it might be performance marketing, it might be CRM,
Mm.
it might be social, for example, then I think it is much easier to go into a specialist part of an agency with that experience. Or if you have a vertical sector experience.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a real depth in financial
Yeah.
services because you've worked at Lloyd's and I don't know, NatWest as a marketeer, and then you go into an agency and do that specialist, I think it's easier
Yeah.
to cross over.
Yeah. It's interesting because obviously I'm a specialist, and it took me about, I don't know, you have to ask my boss, but I would say about 3 months before I got completely comfortable, because a lot of the role was very similar. It was still coming up with, campaigns and programs and loyalty recommendation, whatever it was. But there's a few things that really threw me around, like, well, I don't make the decision anymore. Right, okay. And like the amount of minutiae you have to deal with. I wrote an article about this recently, about the amount of minutiae you have to deal with client side that has nothing to do with marketing. The amount of time I spent when I was head of marketing at Game for a year, the amount of time I actually spent marketing was so small because you're managing people, finance, all this other stuff. Whereas if you're a planner, that's all you do. You're trying, you're problem solving largely. Obviously, you might have a team to manage and things like that. But in general, I've always thought I would love somebody who's only ever been agency side and been in planning for 20 years to go and try and be a marketing director for a year and vice versa. Because I do think there's I would say this because I'm biased, but I think there's definitely a value in having a little bit of that, I suppose, swapping of skills, actually owning a project and trying to get it over the line and dealing with retail stores and all that sort of stuff I think it's quite an interesting thing. And vice versa, I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to be better marketer. I'm a better marketer now having worked agency side, without question, I think.
So it's interesting because when I talk to, and I actually recently, for some reason, I've had a massive influx of client side marketers talking to me about agency roles, which I could hazard a guess might be because marketing budgets are being cut, or actually just the same way as in people want to try something new. They want more variety and they think agencies would give that. I'm interested to know what your tip is for those people going into agencies, because I think one of the ways I try to describe it is they know the whole process, but really when it comes down to a strategist in an agency, it's not just about an insight or a piece of data, it's how you put a different spin on that and put a different lens on it and then use that to inspire creatives.
Yes.
And for me, that's the bit that I think the client marketer maybe misses in their role.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing for me, we had an in-house client side. I didn't really work with creative agencies that much, and so when I moved, I was exceptionally lucky that my creative director, a chap called Scott Smith, and I knew I was going to like him from the moment I met him because his phone went off, and his ringtone was TNT by AC/DC. I'm a huge AC/DC fan. I thought, okay, this guy's pretty cool. And he was so kind and so patient. And so was my boss, a wonderful woman called Simone Blakers. So kind and so patient with me in terms of helping me understand how to write a creative prop, the one line, the most important line in the brief, yada, yada, yada. So I think there was a couple of things. I think it was one, don't put too much pressure on yourself to be good, to be amazing from day one. And I think I would also say that of the agency. If you've seen something in them, give them a bit of time for that to come out because it is a big transition. Don't expect them to be perfect from day one. I know of people who have been great client side and gone to an agency side and they weren't supported and it didn't work out for them. And then they've gone somewhere else and they were supported and they've become rock stars. So I think from an agency perspective, support them. From a client perspective, be prepared to humble yourself a little bit and spend time with other great planners. Would be another one if you can. Allow yourself you've got time to learn agency side. You don't have time to do that client side. No one's because you're constantly in trading meetings or whatever it might be, you're expected to have expanded your horizons a little bit when you're a planner. You're not, you're expected to read around the subject and absorb stuff in. So I think be kind to yourself, give yourself some time, put in the effort in terms of reading around the subject, and don't ever lose that client mentality. Don't ever lose that, because it will stand you in good stead sometimes. So we work with a retailer now who's going through a lot of the same pains that I went through when I was head of CRM at a retailer. And I'm able to kind of go, okay, well, have you tried this, or what about that? And it's not marketing stuff, it's political stuff or different things that have really helped. So I say, don't ever lose the creative client mindset. I would say is another one as well.
No, I think that's good advice, and interesting. I mean, you asked me at the beginning of the question. I mean, when I see a CV and I've got someone who's worked as a brand manager somewhere and has then worked in agency, person really rich and really interesting, will have different perspectives and will bring a lot to the roles. And I think agencies find that appealing. I think it's maybe hard if you've done one particular type of role for a long period of time to then suddenly make the change.
I would agree with that. Talking about doing things for a long period of time, kind of our penultimate question was around diversity, and I speak as somebody who's getting a little bit older now. Diversity is, and rightly, a huge topic within agency land, whether that is race or gender or, that horrible word, class. I'm from Birmingham, let's say class. Neurodiversity we've talked about, and age. So what sort of strategies have you seen? I mean, that obviously comes up a lot. And what strategies have you seen that have actually worked in creating diversity in recruitment? You must see those principles in play almost more than most, in a sense. So what have you seen that's kind of worked?
I mean, I think at a grassroots level, hiring into junior roles, I think most well-established agencies are doing a really good job there.
Good.
And there are some great initiatives, things like the Brixton Finishing School. At the Industry Club, we have something called Marketing Debuts, which is specifically to help young people who maybe haven't been to university to get into and break into advertising. Brooklyn Brothers has Night School. There's lots of really great things at a ground-roots level. I think that there are also initiatives that some agencies use that I think open more doors. So blind CVs, for example, taking off education, taking off sex, taking off anything that suggests about what their background is, which I think is great as well. So where I see the struggles a little bit more are, it's great to have more diversity in more junior roles, but if they're looking up at an agency and everyone at the agency is white men, then I think also, I mean, I have quite a point of view on ageism, because I think everyone talks a good game on diversity. Fundamentally, a piece of feedback we regularly get is they're too experienced for the role, meaning they're too old or they're too experienced. And it's a really, really tricky one. And I was talking to someone a few months ago, and we were talking about ageism and the fact I'd worked in agencies 15, 18 years and that they had done the same. And he was joking with me and he said, "Oh, how many retirement parties have you been to at an agency?" I don't think I've been to one. So that's one thing that I think needs to change. And I think there are organizations helping that and trying to improve that. Things like Creative Equals, getting people back to work after being parents. I think one of the other things as well that agencies and any employee needs to recognize is if you bring people from different backgrounds into an organization, that different people require different levels of support. Not everyone's been to university, not everybody has come from the same background, and some people have some real challenges and struggles. And we've sort of offered apprenticeship programs, and I think agencies need to, HR teams and agencies need to have a real level of support for those people joining them that they might not need to have had previously.
No, I think that's fair.
So I think that's really important. I mean, I think what will be interesting is seeing the big push for more diverse workforce at a junior level. Does that maintain and work its way up? And that's the telling point, really.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. That's the true marker is it's getting people in, but are you putting them in a position to succeed? I couldn't agree more. Okay. So last question. This is a bit of a fun one. So I launched this in the last season of podcasts. I'm sure you've heard of Room 101. If not the actual literary thing, but the TV show. So basically, Room 101 is a place where people can try and put in the things they don't like to be locked away in purgatory for forever and ever. So if I was to ask you what thing about marketing or agency recruitment or just agency/marketing in general, would you like to put into the Everybody Hates Your Brand Room 101?
Tricky question. I was thinking about this. I would probably put in the feedback, not the right cultural fit.
Oh, that's a good one.
Because I suppose in some respects I know what it means, but that actually is everything that agencies shouldn't be about these days. And I think not cultural fit. When I look at other industries, and whether it's law firms, finance companies, manufacturing, tech, there is not such a kind of importance about, are you the mini me copy the right cultural fit?
Yeah.
And I think advertising still has that. And yes, we need people who are young, innovative, got new ideas, fresh ideas, but we need everyone else as well.
Yeah.
So that would be, I mean, I would also probably say anyone who never sends me feedback.
Well, look, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been a really enlightening chat. So we appreciate you coming onto the podcast. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Well, I really hope you enjoyed that discussion. It was a lot of fun to do, and I hope enlightening for you to listen to. The next episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand is coming soon, so if you like this and want to hear more, please remember to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're using so you don't miss an episode. And always remember, take great care and be vigilant.